Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Last night I got to see Spider-Man No Way Home. I was planning on doing a review of it right after leaving the theater, but by the time I got home it was 2 in the morning. So I'm just doing this right now. I am going to be talking about like a lot of spoilers. I'm basically going through the entire film. So if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it, then come back here. If you don't care about spoilers, then let's get started. So, first off, right off the bat, the movie was great. It starts off pretty much right where the last one left off, where there was that post-credit scene of Far From Home with the Daily Bugle scene with Jameson talking about how Spider-Man killed Mysterio and Mysterio revealed Parker's identity. So Peter and MJ pretty much have to escape New York, or at the very least go back to their house, go back to May's apartment, uh, and there's nothing very much to say about that. It only really picks up and starts being cool when they actually get sent to prison, and um, and there's a cameo from Daredevil. I wish he was in the movie more, because he only shows up for about a minute and a half to talk about how, while he lifted the charges on Peter, there's still the matter of like public opinion, as he calls it. There was that cool scene where like a brick is thrown through the window and Daredevil catches it before Peter can. I do kind of wish that they actually showed the whole trial and court scene, because they just breeze by that way too quick, in my opinion. Uh, the movie doesn't really pick up until Peter actually meets up with Doctor Strange, although it is nice to show just how much of how much of this has affected not only Peter's life but also MJ's and Ned's, where like they don't get into MIT. They're pretty much shunned at school. Everybody knows who Peter is, and they're always crowding around him and saying things like Mysterio was right, he's a murderer, all that kind of stuff. One thing that I did forget to say um, one of the things that they could have done is, so back during the Far From Home post credit scene, when Mysterio is framing Peter, then he goes off and says that Spider-Man's real name is Peter Parker. Uh, what Matt Murdock could have easily done was say like that video was doctored, because it absolutely was. Because he never actually showed a video of Peter's face. All he did was show Spider-Man from the neck down, and then it cut to like a high school yearbook photo of Peter. So they could have easily just said, well, Peter Parker is not Spider-Man, this video is clearly doctored. But that still probably wouldn't have changed anything about the public opinion part that Matt said during his cameo. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of things could have been solved with just easily disproving that video. So because MJ and Ned go to because they don't get accepted for MIT, Peter decides to meet up with Doctor Strange to basically go back in time and just undo all of this. And Strange rightly says that the Infinity Stones are gone, the Time Stone is gone. Although as I recall, there are some spells to go back in time without the Time Stone. I think that's what he did in the What If series. Actually, no, that's a lie. He still used the Time Stone, but I'm still pretty sure that there are some time travel spells that he could use, but whatever. So instead, Peter asks him to basically brainwash the entire world. of forgetting that he was Spider-Man. And this is where I think the movie got a little bit stupid, um, where Strange kept on having to redo the spell, and he said that Parker changed it 6 times, although Peter claimed that it was just 5. And that's where they outright admit that Peter was too stupid to not call MIT instead of just going straight to Doctor Strange. And I don't know if this was the movie's way of calling out Peter or calling out their own stupid writing, but I don't know. The movie's got a movie, I guess. So, so Peter kind of screws up the spell, and that's before he realizes that he can just call someone from MIT. And I just think that makes him look incredibly stupid. So, so he meets up with that spokesperson from MIT on the bridge. We get that scene where he meets Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock realizes that that the Spider-Man he's fighting is not Peter Parker, even though he thought that he was because of the new high-tech suit. It was pretty cool that Peter could actually control Otto's arms when he absorbed the nanites. Way to go, Ock! You played yourself on that one. Although I will say it is pretty cool to see Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe, Jamie Foxx, and all these other veteran actors from the classic Spider-Man films coming back to reprise their roles one last time. So Green Goblin appears after the fight with Octavius. Spider-Man gets transported back to the Doctor Strange Sanctum Sanctorum, where he's basically given the rundown that because he botched that spell 5 times, they now have Spider-Man villains from all the other universes. And I do kind of wish that it was just bumped up to 6, mostly to get a multiversal Sinister Six, and I don't know if they're just planning on using Sinister Six for a future film, because I'm pretty sure they mentioned that there's going to be a whole new trilogy of Spider-Man films taking place during college, and that's great, although I still think that was a little bit of a cop-out when they only brought in 5 of the villains for this film. I mean, for the 6th one, they didn't even need to have the 6th villain be a multiversal guy. They could have brought back Vulture from Homecoming, or they could have had Scorpion, because we never actually saw Scorpion in his actual suit. Although in the post-credit scene of Homecoming, he was talking about how he's gathering a team to kill the Spider. Or just bring back Kingpin, because, spoilers for Hawkeye, by the way, Kingpin is returning in that series, although I don't think that's a spoiler, because that thing was rumored pretty much before Hawkeye Episode 1 ever came out. So they could have easily done a Sinister Six and not have to pull someone from the multiverse. But whatever. So Spider-Man goes to somewhere in the woods and fights Electro. Sandman helps him a bit, but excuse me. But Sandman ends up turning against him once he realizes that he's not the Peter Parker that he knows. But they all get captured. They get placed in these magical prisons. Oh, speaking of that magical prison, I do kind of wish that they actually showed Doctor Strange capturing the lizard, because they brushed by that a little bit too quick, where Peter is fighting Octavius, and he meets he meets the Green Goblin right before Doctor Strange transports him back to the Sanctum. and Doctor Strange just casually says like, "Oh yeah, I found this lizard in the sewers, so he's here now." I I hope that there's a deleted or extended scene that actually shows him like fighting Lizard and then transporting him to the Sanctum. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be like a short fight, given that Doctor Strange is like magic, but whatever. Um, so after they capture Doc Ock, Lizard, Electro, and Sandman, all that's left is Green Goblin, who, um, who currently is switched personalities back to Norman Osborn, and he's over at like that one charity place called Feast that's ran by Aunt May. Oh, by the way, that was a really nice touch where the next scene that shows Norman like regaining control instead of the Goblin. He's like hiding his glider, and the Green Goblin mask is hanging off the side of a dumpster. I thought that was a really nice touch because it looked like a lot similar to when Peter Parker threw away his Spider-Man suit back in Spider-Man 2. So that was a pretty nice, cool Easter egg. But Norman ends up shattering the mask because he hopes that that will like bury the Green Goblin persona. He meets Aunt May, but not the Aunt May that he knows. She calls Peter. He runs over thinking that she's in danger, but instead Norman like wants his help in getting rid of the Goblin personality. But he's brought back to the Sanctum. Doctor Strange puts him in another cell, just like with Ock and all the others, and he plans to send them all back until all the villains basically reveal that like you're all dead. Sandman reveals that both Ock and Goblin died years ago on his world, and Electro, I think, also died in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And what's really interesting about this is that they didn't die like how I thought they would. Like I thought that Doctor Octopus would I thought he would have switched universes when he went down in the river with his machine back in Spider-Man 2. I thought that's what would have sent him to another universe, or like Electro when he gets overloaded in the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I thought the overloaded part would send him into the MCU, but no. Apparently they swap universes pretty much right before they die, not as they die, if that makes sense. Where like Ock is talking about how he nearly killed Peter, like he had one of his arms around Peter's throat, and this is right before he goes back to being good, so that explains why he's still evil. So that was pretty cool. So Peter finds out that Peter finds out sorry Peter finds out from Strange that they all die fighting Spider-Man. Well, most of them die. So instead of just sending them back, he steals like the magic cube box that's supposed to send them all to their home universes. And this is pretty much my favorite scene of the whole movie, where Doctor Strange and Spider-Man pretty much fight in the mirror dimension. That's one of the coolest things I've seen in a Marvel movie. Doctor Strange is still one of my favorites, so it was nice that they brought back the mirror dimension, and it was also nice that that this sort of felt like a team-up movie, whereas in Spider-Man Homecoming and in Spider-Man Far From Home, it felt like Tony Stark and Nick Fury were like guest characters where they'd pop up every few minutes. But this one, it actually felt like Doctor Strange had a pretty big role instead of just coming out of nowhere just to save Peter. But they fight in the mirror dimension. They actually do a pretty good job in explaining how Spider-Man actually defeats Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension. Because at the end of the day, the mirror dimension is made up of like geometrical shapes, which apparently he excelled at in school. So he actually showcases his intelligence to fight Doctor Strange on his own turf and win. So that just made the scene all the more cooler. But Peter defeats Doctor Strange, gets him trapped there by stealing his sling ring. And then he takes all the villains to May and Happy Hogan's apartment, where he starts developing these cures for the characters. And it actually works on... And it actually works on Octavius, where back in Spider-Man 2, that neural chip in the back of his head got fried during his first fight with Spider-Man. And that's how the arms were able to take control, but Peter creates this new chip where Otto is actually given control. And he starts working on all the other cures, but before Electro can be cured, the Goblin persona takes over Norman, and he convinces them all to turn on Spider-Man, except for Otto. So Electro and Sandman escape. Lizard escapes. And speaking of Lizard, right before I forget about this, so I'll be honest, I haven't seen the Amazing Spider-Man movies, so I haven't really seen a lot of Lizard, but that British accent for Lizard just doesn't work with me. I don't know if it works with other people, but it just rubs me the wrong way just hearing the Lizard speak like in that kind of accent. Like he just sounds a little bit too sophisticated for a lizard. But back to the fight at the apartment. The Goblin persona takes over, and he gets into a pretty brutal fist fight with Peter that showcases that like he can actually take Peter's hits in this film. And not only that, but Goblin actually kind of throws around Peter like he's a rag doll. But they pretty much fight all the way until they get to the ground floor by smashing through walls and the floor. And it ends with Goblin killing Aunt May. And Aunt May is the one to give the great power comes great responsibility message. I can't remember if that was even said during Homecoming or Far From Home, but that was... I don't know, they finally said it at least. So, because of that, Peter basically goes missing for weeks, I think. I don't know, there's some kind of time jump that I can't remember how long it is. But pretty much the last thing that Parker sees is this huge billboard screen of J. Jonah Jameson basically talking about how like everything that Peter touches dies. Like he's basically blaming Aunt May's death on himself, which in hindsight Peter probably thinks that too. But while he goes missing, Ned and MJ are looking for him, and in the process, after that fight with Doctor Strange, Ned was given the sling ring, and somehow he's able to create portals now. I honestly don't think that should be possible, and the reason why I say that is because back during Doctor Strange, you had like these adult sorcerers who were still training on using portals. Even Doctor Strange, he had to really focus. He had to really focus to create a portal, and that was when the Ancient One dropped him off on Mount Everest. And then you got Ned, who is basically casually opening a portal to like different parts of the world or different parts of New York to search for Peter. And in doing so, we actually finally get to see Andrew Garfield and Tobey's Spider-Man return. And that, I know it was leaked, I know it was confirmed, but that was still great to see all those guys on the big screen again. So Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire come back. I do think that the whole bit about Andrew proving that he's Spider-Man went on a little bit too long. But maybe they thought that maybe the filmmakers thought that they should probably add in a comedy scene after just killing Aunt May. But that's just my guess. So they end up finding Peter on some kind of rooftop. The two Spider-Man variants give their backstories about how like their Uncle Bens were killed, and they told them the same thing about great power comes great responsibility. Peter regains hope instead of just sending all the villains back. And they work on fixing those cures for all the villains. So, but no, they end up going to the Statue of Liberty because it's more or less isolated. Although there was construction on replacing the Statue of Liberty's torch with Captain America's shield. Sorry. That was a pretty cool touch. And a pretty cool connection to the Hawkeye series, because in the latest episode, Black Widow's sister, Yelena Belova, she mentioned that since it's her first time in New York, she wants to see a lot of things, including the new and improved Statue of Liberty. So I guess that pretty much confirms that Hawkeye takes place after Spider-Man No Way Home, and I'll get back to that in a minute. So they all go to the Statue of Liberty, and this is another part that I think that went on way too long. Where Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are just talking and just cracking jokes. At one point, Tobey has like a stiff back, so Andrew cracks it for him. I don't know, I feel like that whole scene just went on for a little bit too long, which is a shame because like I want to see more Andrew and Tobey, but I want to see them like kicking ass. I don't really want to see them talking too much, like them talking about like having a heart-to-heart, like that scene with that scene where Tobey and Andrew meet Peter and they talk about how they lost loved ones, which Andrew also throws in that he lost Gwen Stacy back during Amazing Spider-Man 2. That scene was great. That scene was awesome. But it's just when they're too humorous, that's when I just start to lose interest and think like, get us back to the fighting, which they eventually do. So Electro, Lizard, and Sandman show up to the Statue of Liberty. And after a pretty long and admittedly cool fight, they do end up curing all of them. It was pretty cool that once they cured Sandman, like he got reverted back to his human form to show that yes, this is Thomas Hayden Church, because throughout the entire movie, it was just his body covered in sand. I think that was what they did for the Ultimate Comics, but it was nice that they showed that it's the same actor from Spider-Man 3. Same thing with Lizard. Once he gets cured, it's like the Rizafons, Dr. Kurt Connors. I think that's what his name is. I'm sorry if I butchered the name, but whatever. Electro. They end up curing him too, obviously, but it's actually Dr. Otto Octavius who cures him. Like, he first pretends to be on their side, but then he tricks Electro, and replaces the arc reactor on his chest with that cure. I do think I do kind of wonder where exactly Octavius was in all of this, because it's not like he was captured or anything, and he probably could have made his way to the Statue of Liberty pretty easily. But after this all happens, Ned creates a portal which apparently accidentally sends Doctor Strange back to them, where at first Doctor Strange is pissed off until he realized that Peter's plan to like cure all the villains actually works. But he still wants to send them all back to their universe, because because he rightfully says like this whole thing has to end, like this whole madness is because of Peter, and because of that Aunt May is dead. And New York basically got ransacked. Well, not ransacked, but it got attacked during that scene where Aunt May died. So Doctor Strange is preparing to send all the villains back, but then the Green Goblin finally shows up. And what I thought was a pretty interesting scene was where Dr. Octopus actually kind of protects Doctor Strange while he's trying to do the spell. Like, he actually, like, uses his arms to catch those, what was it, those, like, pumpkin bombs with the blades on the ends. I can't remember what exactly they were called from the first Spider-Man film. But that was pretty cool, and it made me think back to that one scene in Spider-Man 2 where Jonah Jameson was trying to come up with a name for Doc Ock, and Ted Raimi's character brings up Doctor Strange, and Jameson says, "That's great, but it's taken." And that kind of made me wonder, like, do Spider-Man and Octavius know of Doctor Strange in their world? But the only wrench in that work is the fact that apparently Toby doesn't know about magic in his world, so maybe Doctor Strange isn't a sorcerer yet in his universe. Like, maybe he's still a neurosurgeon, but but that was a nice touch. And I guess speaking of Jameson, I do kind of wish there was a scene where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man actually meets the John Jameson of the MCU, and makes a remark about how he looks almost exactly like his J. Jonah Jameson. But that, I don't know, that was a missed opportunity, I guess. But so back to the final fight. Green Goblin gets a hold of the box, but Doc Ock and Doctor Strange work together in taking it back until they realize, like, oh crap, there's a pumpkin bomb lodged into it, and it explodes, which causes basically the multiverse to crack open, and they're beginning to send these like these other villains through. They don't actually show them, but you can hear their screams, and I'm assuming that we'll have sent all of the other villains, and possibly even other villains that we haven't seen, like, say, the Kurt Connors of Tobey's world, if he became the Lizard, Harry Osborn New Goblin, the Topher Grace Venom, the Rhino from the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and Harry Osborn's Green Goblin from Amazing Spider-Man 2. I don't know. I think that would have been pretty cool to actually show their faces, like, even from archive footage. That would have been nice, but whatever. So Doctor Strange starts to try to patch up the multiverse, while Peter, Tom Holland's Peter, fights the Green Goblin on the destroyed Statue of Liberty. And it's a pretty brutal fight. I do wish that they didn't use so many cuts for it, because it was pretty cool where Parker actually tries to kill Norman by smashing his fist through the metal and, like, creating basically a crater in it. But Peter ends up nearly killing Norman with his own glider too, just like in the first movie. But Tobey's Spider-Man stops him because like he doesn't want, well, neither of the Spider-Man want Tom Holland's Peter to like go down a bitter and dark path just because he lost somebody. Um, so Tobey's Peter stops him from killing Goblin, and then he gets the cure, injects Norman with it. He loses the Goblin personality, realizes what he's done, and with that all taken care of, Spider-Man goes back, meets up with Doctor Strange. They realize that they cracked open the multiverse. Well, Goblin cracked open the multiverse by destroying the box. So Peter ends up telling Strange to create a new spell where everybody in the entire world forgets that he's ever Spider-Man, and not only forgets that he ever existed. Which that includes MJ, Ned, and Doctor Strange, and pretty much everybody. So right before Strange casts the spell, Peter says goodbye to MJ and Ned. Toby and Andrew get sent back to their universes. All the villains get sent back to their universes. I do kind of think that there could have been like maybe a really short scene that actually shows like what happens to them when they return, because like they got cured, so they shouldn't die because their timelines changed drastically. I don't know. Maybe Otto and Norman are like helping Peter like protect New York or something. I don't know. That could have been a pretty cool scene in my opinion. But so Strange ends up casting the spell that everybody in the world forgets that Peter Parker ever existed. So Peter considers like telling MJ and Ned that he's Spider-Man again, but then he kind of remembers that like that ended up putting a lot of stress on their lives, and he doesn't want to put them through that again. So instead, he just rents out an apartment. I think that was supposed to be like a tongue-in-cheek reference to the Rent meme of Spider-Man 2, I believe, or Spider-Man 3. I can't remember, but. So now Peter's like completely on his own. He has no Stark Tech. He has no Nick Fury to help him out. It doesn't really say if Peter's an Avenger or not, but I'm assuming that he probably isn't because like nobody knows who he is. And now he's making like this new suit that's like the classic red and blue. And the final shot shows him like swinging through New York during Christmas time, and that's basically how the movie ends. And going back to the whole Hawkeye thing, I'm pretty sure that final shot of him swinging through New York when it's snowing, I'm pretty sure that takes place just 1 week before the whole Hawkeye series, but that's just my speculation. So all in all, this movie was really great. It did have a couple flaws, like they injected too much humor. At least in my opinion, it did for some scenes. Some of the humor scenes dragged along way too much. There were a few times where like they actually pulled out memes, like Norman Osborn saying like, "Oh, I'm something of a scientist myself." And that whole mention of Rent, I still think that that's supposed to be a reference to Mr. Ditkovich from the Sam Raimi trilogy, but that's just a whole guess on my opinion. They even had a reference to like that really old Spider-Man TV show, where it had like two Spider-Man pointing at each other from across the street. Where like during the end credits, where it shows like hand-drawn Spider-Man images, there's a scene where it actually shows like 2 or 3 of them pointing to each other. So that was a nice touch. And speaking of the credits, there is a scene with Venom. That's a post-credit scene where he's just in a bar talking with the bartender about about the Avengers and how like a guy in a tin suit, Iron Man, existed, and so did a big green guy named the Hulk. And they also talk about Thanos for a tiny bit, and Eddie is clearly drunk. Venom says that as much. He ends up insulting the guy for saying like, well, aliens aren't interested in these magic stones. They're just interested in eating brains, just like Venom is. But then before they talk more, Eddie is transported back to his universe where, like, at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage, there was that post-credit scene where he was transported to the MCU. And he actually saw an image of Spider-Man, and I thought that was gearing up for hopefully a solo movie where Spider-Man actually fights Tom Hardy's Venom. But no, he ends up talking for a bit. He thinks about seeing Spider-Man, and then he gets transported back to his universe. And it's like what Venom said in that post-credit scene, like, they just got there and then they're gone. I mean, they did leave a piece of the symbiote there to eventually set up that Peter will eventually get the symbiote suit, just like in Spider-Man 3. But, I don't know, they should have kept Spider-Man they should have kept Venom in there a little bit longer so that, you know, he and Peter actually meet up, because now that Peter doesn't really know Doctor Strange or anyone, I'm not entirely sure how exactly they're going to have Peter show up in, like, a Venom movie or anything. Now, Norman did say at the very end before he leaves that, like, that he'd be happy for Peter to, like, jump universes and collaborate with him at some point. But I don't really know how that's going to work, seeing as how, well, Doctor Strange doesn't know him anymore. So, unless if he does go through with reintroducing himself, which he could do, he just chooses not to, then I don't see how, like, he'll be able to jump universes, unfortunately. Which is a shame, because I would have really wanted to see a fight scene between Tom Holland and Tom Hardy. But the credits keep on going. Nothing really stood out for me, except for this one credit that said, like, special thanks to Avia Red, who is, like, the original true believer. And I don't know if I'm gonna get flack for this, but I'm not really in the business of thanking the guy who pushed to have Venom in Spider-Man 3 against Sam Raimi's wishes, and then also caused Sam Raimi to leave Spider-Man 4 because of creative differences, I believe. And I'm not even that big of a fan of the Sam Raimi films, but I am a big fan of Sam Raimi himself, mostly because of his Evil Dead films. But I don't know, that whole thing about thanking Avi Arad, and I get it that he was a producer. He was an executive producer for all three of these MCU Spider-Man films. So I get it that they kind of have to thank him, but I don't know, just sitting there seeing that credit up there, I immediately thought of, like, oh, this was the guy who kind of forced Venom to be shoehorned in the third Sam Raimi film. But whatever, that was pretty much my only other nitpick. After the credits, there is another post-credit scene that actually isn't even really a post-credit scene. It's like an entire trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, where so I remember there being all these leaks about how, like, Wanda Maximoff is going to be the main villain, where she's trying to get her kids back. And the trailer, if that's how the movie goes, then the trailer is certainly misleading, because Doctor Strange goes to her for help about the multiverse, because the stuff that Doctor Strange did in this movie, where where he and Peter, well, technically Peter, there is a scene where MJ tries to put the blame on Doctor Strange, and maybe this is another nitpick, but I kind of wish that he called both her and Peter out that this was Peter's fault. Peter was the one who botched the spell. All Strange tried to do is try to accommodate Peter's wishes. But, I don't know, because of Peter botching the spell and the Green Goblin basically cracking open the multiverse, that leads to the plot of Multiverse of Madness, where the multiverse is, like, in disarray. And because of this, Doctor Strange needs Wanda to help him out with fixing it. I mean, the trailer made it look like Mordo is going to be the main bad guy, with a special appearance by, I believe, Supreme Strange from that one What If episode. I don't think that's the case. I think what's going to happen is Carl Mordo is basically the villain for like the first half of the film, or actually maybe even just the first act. And then Supreme Strange is going to be the villain for either Act 2 or Act 3. And then at some point, the secondary villain will be Wanda, because she is still trying to find her kids in the multiverse, based on that one post-credit scene from WandaVision, where when Doctor Strange first goes to her for help, that's when she starts getting ideas, and eventually she turns on Strange because she's trying to find her kids, Tommy and Billy. And they did mention Westview from the events of WandaVision. They did show kind of this one scene where I believe that's Shuma Gorath that Doctor Strange fights in the middle of the streets. That was pretty cool. There isn't really too much else to go on about this, but I am excited for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, because going back to Sam Raimi, he's directing this film. I've heard that it's supposed to be the MCU's first horror film, as they call it. I'm not sure just how much horror they're gonna put into it, but seeing as how Sam Raimi is directing it, I have a good feeling, as long as the producers let him use like his style of directing, of like where in Evil Dead you'd have like a first person tracking shot of like the evil demon like zooming across the woods, which he also used in Spider-Man 2 for Doc Ock's arms during that one hospital scene. And like these other like dark scenes with shadows and everything. It does look like that's what they're gonna do with this one scene with Wong. So, however it turns out, even if it's not a horror movie, I'm still excited for it, because Doctor Strange, the first Doctor Strange was one of my favorite MCU films, just because of how different and unique it is to the rest of the films. But as for the plot itself, I think what happens is, because of the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, which based on the trailer, I do have to wonder like if Strange actually does still know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, or if he just knows about Spider-Man, and they worked a few times, like once during Avengers and once during No Way Home, where he just knows of Spider-Man and he worked together. It's just he doesn't know that he's Peter Parker, and that's how they still kept that whole thing intact, where they cracked open the multiverse. But that's just my guess. So because of that, Doctor Strange has to fix the multiverse. Mordo. Sorry, low power. Because of that, Mordo basically goes and visits him. He says that the greatest threat is himself, which, now that I think of it, they're probably setting up Supreme Strange to be the main villain, which he's a cool character from What If, but I don't want a Doctor Strange villain that is just has the exact same powers as him, because we already had that during the What If episode. But I don't know. I think it'll be cooler if they actually did go with Wanda being the main bad guy in the film. I doubt they're going to do that. I remember seeing this one video where this one guy says that like killing off the first female hero being Black Widow, and then turning the second one being Scarlet Witch into a villain wouldn't be a good look for the MCU. And as preachy as that is, I do kind of see their point, and I'm pretty sure that's exactly what the MCU is thinking about. And that's why I'm pretty sure they're not going to make Wanda into a bad guy. They're not. But whatever, we'll just have to wait and see. But I do think that it would be cool if she did actually become like the Scarlet Witch antagonist, like in the comics. Like they could easily do what they did in the comics, where Wanda becomes possessed by the villain Chthon, and that's what makes her the villain, and that's why Doctor Strange has to stop her. But like I said, I doubt they're going to do that. I'm pretty sure they're holding off on Chthon for a long time. Like they haven't even gotten to Mephisto yet, unfortunately. But I don't know. Whatever happens, I'm excited for Multiverse of Madness, and No Way Home was a great prelude into that. So if you're a fan of the MCU and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, you're definitely going to like this movie, especially because the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man show up, as well as their villains of Alfred Molina, Willem Dafoe, Jamie Foxx, Riz Ifans, and Thomas Hayden Church. All those guys come back, so all of you guys that are feeling nostalgic for the classic Spider-Man films, they're all in there. There's really something for everyone. Like, even if you're a casual moviegoer, you're gonna have a blast on this one. Like, every single theater every single movie theater. Sorry, the movie theater that I went to, every single screen was playing that film. Like, it was that big, and pretty much all the seats were taken. Like, you guys saw from my video last night that I ended up getting a seat in the middle of the second row, where I basically had to crane my neck up to see the screen. But that's how big this whole thing was. Like, basically almost every single seat was taken. But it's a really great film. I liked it a heck of a lot more than Homecoming and Far From Home, which is saying a lot because I did like both of those movies, mostly because they were MCU films. I guess the last thing I gotta say though is that this Peter Parker, he is kind of like the least comic accurate, mostly because he's always facing like these really big threats, and he's more known as like a street level hero. And like it's like I said earlier, like every other film that he's been in for the MCU, like they have all these guest characters, and not once has he like truly gotten like a solo film where it's just him. Like, they've had Iron Man come in the first movie to save his bacon. They had Nick Fury coming in and basically saying like, hey, come with me to Europe to help stop this threat. And now Peter has gone to Doctor Strange for help. So hopefully whenever they do the next trilogy, hopefully they do show Peter like solving problems on his own, because it looks like the movie ended with him becoming the more comic accurate version of Peter Parker. So I'd be happy to see another movie where it actually shows him doing that. But that's really all it. I guess my final thoughts was that it was a great movie. It was definitely worth the wait after seeing that and all the other MCU films get delayed. Definitely go check it out when you guys have the chance. And I will see you guys in the next review. Bye.